We have major Leafs updates to go over today as Craig Berube continues to make moves. We have a bunch of updates ahead of tonight's electric game against the Ottawa Senators. We'll break down exactly what those are, as well as discuss some interesting comments from both the players and some updates on the Senators side as they have made some more moves as well. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, folks. Before we get into it, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, about 70% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed. This is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your support has been unbelievable. And a quick reminder, if you're new here, or if you aren't, we will be live following tonight's game. So if you want to stay tuned for that, it would mean the world to myself and Darius. Darius, let's dive right into it. A ton of things to go over today, and we have a bunch of updates from both the Senators side, the Leafs side. And let's start with, of course, the Leafs side. Now, there was some concern following Stolarz. Of course, yesterday, there was a bunch of hard hits in game one, and everyone is healthy, and Stolarz has officially been confirmed as the game two starter tonight for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we covered a lot of the updates in yesterday's video, and a lot of these have been confirmed, but we've seen, especially during the regular season, where there's times where what happens the day before in practice doesn't necessarily translate to the game, especially as it pertains to the lines themselves. And let's dive right into a couple different things here. So I want to start with the lines, and I just showed you guys a little bit of, power play stuff that we'll dive into. Let's start with the lines. All signs point to the Leafs dressing the following lineup per Jonas Siegel. You have Nyes, Matthews, Marner, Holmberg, Tavares, Nylander, McMahon, Domi, Robo, Lorentz, Lawton, Yarncroke, with the blue line staying the same. And they actually did end up going back and putting McCabe and Tanev on the first pairing. But this is official now. Holmberg is in the second pairing. Domi is in the third. So it wasn't just a thing at practice yesterday. It is the official lineup heading into tonight's game with Stolarz starting in net. And my nerves are a little bit more calm than they were for game one, but the Leafs have to come out with this lineup. And I'm very curious to see, they have to send a message. I'm very curious to see how Holmberg does on the second lineup, because he didn't necessarily have an impressive game in game one, but Domi looked really bad on the second line to start the game.
Yeah, he looked terrible on the second line, and I think that he looked a lot better when he was paired with the usual suspects there on the third line. The third line did look really good the rest of the game, and I would say outplayed the Senators' bottom six as well. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on if they end up shifting things further as we kind of go throughout the game there. And then obviously, Max Domi was the first one on the ice for morning skate this morning. So obviously trying to put in some work. I think he recognizes that probably wasn't the best game for him last game, but he's going to be back in the lineup, and then not obviously back in the lineup, but he's going to be there on the third line playing the center position. So it's going to be interesting to see how he progresses and continues to do that, because that's something that they've kind of gotten away from, but now they're back to it. It's working, so why not? So we'll see how that goes. And then Holmberg on the second line, that's going to be interesting too, because Holmberg wasn't really a game breaker or anything last game. So I wonder what's going to happen there. But we know what Tavares and Nylander can do together. And then obviously, I think the biggest thing in this game is, and we're going to get to it in a second, the Senators, there's going to be a ton of pushback in this game. They're going to come in more reserved. I feel like they're going to calm down a little bit. The Leafs need to continue to stay disciplined and composed. This is the most composed in that game one that I've seen them in this entire era in the playoffs. If they continue to do that, they'll find success, especially if the power play is clicking like it was. So, that's another factor too. The power play's got to get going. But in terms of the lines, everything's almost the same as last game besides the start, essentially.
Yeah, and hopefully the crowd can come out and be what they were yesterday, according to all accounts. I mean, apparently Sportsnet and certain broadcasts toned the crowd down a lot. It was electric looking at some of the videos of the OEL goal. It was and a bunch of different things there. But let's dive into a couple different things. You mentioned it. Max Domi came out early for a skill session. We've seen this a lot lately after practices or before skates. So Max Domi, he probably had the worst game out of the bunch. You could argue a couple other guys, but it's going to be interesting to see how he returns in tonight's game on the new line. And again, we say new halfway through the game yesterday. I think it was somewhere in the second period, midway through or so. It's hard to tell exactly when they made that change. Craig Berube did, and they're sticking with that. And you can see this here from Mark Masters. All three Leafs power play goals came within 10 seconds of the faceoff, and Nyes came out and said, we want to catch them off guard, catch them out of position, and get towards the net as early as possible. And Marner is excelling as, of course, the quarterback that we talk about in hockey with the power play unit. Not an easy job, and he makes it look pretty easy. And Marner had a fantastic game in game one. Matthews had a fantastic game in game one. It's going to be important for them to continue to do that. And Chris Tanev even came out and said, what we can improve on. We've talked about that, but we don't want to tell them. We'll dive into that in a minute. I want to get your thoughts on this here. The power play was electric, and I almost take it for granted a little bit how good it was because of how fast the goals were coming, how many penalties there were. I do think it's going to be a very physical start. I expect a very similar start to game one where there was constant forechecking, constant back checking. There was checking everywhere, including cross-checking, which seems to be across the NHL. Cross-checks in the face aren't being enforced the same way as they were during the regular season towards, Morgan Riley, Austin Matthews, but I'll digress there. it's going to be very physical, but I do agree with you. I think Ottawa's going to try to play a more composed game, and I think that might end up hurting them as a result if they start playing a little bit softer. And I think the Leafs just have to do what they're, paid to do and continue to do that. I am a little bit curious how the refs are going to respond today following, all the meetings they've had following game one. Again, there's a lot of talk about the reffing being biased. I don't think that was the case at all, but I'm curious to see if there's any message sent to the refs from, Gary Bettman in that way, just regarding the physicality level, or if they'll just let it go as it pertains to specifically, cross checks and all those different things. But again, it's playoff hockey. We usually see this, but there's a bit more outcry than usual on this.
Yeah, and I don't think that, first of all, nothing is biased in favor of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's just say that. Like, there's no way. So there's no conspiracy theory there, especially in way of the Ottawa Senators. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting game in terms of discipline. Who's most disciplined today, right? And who's retaliating or not retaliating. The Leafs did a good job of not retaliating. Then when it comes to the power play, one thing we haven't seen, I mean, we've watched every single game this year. Everyone who's tuned in here and subscribed to the channel is keeping tabs on the Leafs, right? Of course, we haven't really seen the quick strike from them, right? And they did that on 3 of the power plays the other night. We haven't really seen that out of him. And I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday that I feel like nobody's really talking about, that there's a couple things in that game one that I feel like the Leafs kind of had up their sleeve, like Berube in terms of structure and what they're doing, that we haven't really seen. And they looked fantastic in game one. If they can bring that over to game two, then they're going to find success in the series for sure. But I feel like, not that they were holding things back, but I feel like they're bringing more to the table that they've been working on that they didn't bring to the regular season, like stuff like that, where the Sens were completely thrown off their game. And it's something they couldn't watch film for. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that where Berube's like, they've been working on things and we haven't really seen it in games until this point. Again, I don't think it has anything to do with like how they play 5-on-5 or anything like that. Every team has their structure, but in terms of like, how you go about the power play or how you go about certain situations on the ice, I wonder if there's a little bit of that where they've been saving it for this moment. So I don't know, something to think about. I'm not saying it's definite that way, because I do think that the Leafs at times are very secretive with certain things, because obviously, there's so much coverage of the team. But it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out tonight, because again, I do expect a better game from the Senators, but if the Leafs can continue to capitalize on those things that are given to them, they'll be fine.
Yeah, flows back into the 10th, thinking about how they don't want to tell them what they can improve on from game one, because obviously you don't want to do that. And we talked about that. We don't want to tell them. And for Jake McCabe, last game doesn't mean much unless you follow it up with a good effort. So a completely different mindset here from the guys. And a couple other things from the Senators' perspective. A couple of their players are drawing into the lineups. You have Thomas Chabot, you have Travis Hamonic. So a couple of different guys here. Ridley Gregg and Nick Jensen are both available for game two. So going to be interesting to see how, Ridley Gregg comes out. People were Leafs fans in our stream, everywhere, were pretty livid at him. He is a, pretty dirty player, but we'll see how it goes for game two. And from the Ottawa Senators side, it's going to be interesting. But for the Leafs side, take care of business. You're the better team. You can see this here from Holmberg, and Craig Berube spoke out on that line change you mentioned. They're just an adjustment to the aforementioned line change with matchups more than anything. He's big and strong. He's able to hold on to the puck down low and make plays. Talking about Pontus. So they seem to love him. And we love the Leafs, and hopefully the Leafs can take care of business. This is a massive game. Game two always sets the tone. Obviously, teams that win game two are much, much better off. We saw the Jets take care of business against the Blues. We're taking things around the NHL, and hopefully the Leafs can take care of business tonight against the Senators. We'll be live following the game, so make sure to stay tuned for that. See you guys later.